Call to order, and could everybody please join me in a pledge of allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you please remain standing for a moment of silence for the beloved Kate Adams? Thank you very much. So certainly a difficult time for our community as we lose one of our cherished teachers, somebody I know who impacted my children's lives. So just condolences to everybody who knew her and her family. Difficult time. Okay. If we could start with the superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, George. I would echo that, George. Kate was one of the first people I met when I came to Santa Mauritius. And it was, it was that summer when I came in, and Kate came to see me, and she came to see me to talk about how, she was, she had been diagnosed and was going to be having a surgery. And we talked through it. And I was so touched by, her openness to talk to somebody new and, share some of her fears, some of, her trepidations. And it was clear she was a very caring, very special person in this community. And the outpouring that we've seen, from everybody in Santa Mauritius has been extraordinary. So Kate will be sorely missed, a more than 20-year career in Santa Mauritius. And everyone has, just nothing but the most wonderful things to say about her sense of humor, her openness, and really just a big loss for us, a resident and a teacher, somebody that spent her entire life, for the past 23 years here in Santa Mauritius. So, just a big loss. So I thank you for that, George. And condolences to the Adams family and everybody in Santa Mauritius that truly cared so much about Kate. So we do have some recognition to do first. So I want to kind of switch gears and go to something a little bit happier here for some of our students to recognize them. I want to introduce, if you could promote, I think, do we have?
Let's see who's here.
Tracy Sigerson.
Yeah, is Ms. Sigerson here? Because Tracy, oh, she is. Okay, she's in. All right.
Oh.
All right. So we did have a talent show, and Ms. Sigerson is the advisor to Friends and Buddies that ran a talent show. And so Ms. Sigerson, we put together a little bit of a video. So maybe if you can intro it so that the board and the community can see some of the talent that we have in Santa Mauritius, and a little montage of the winners. So go ahead, Tracy.
Hi. So Lauren Natink and I both are the advisors for Friends and Buddies. And in September, we were fortunate enough to have a student show up at our room and look for the Friends and Buddies Club. We explained to him that due to COVID, we weren't really sure what that would look like, and that maybe it would be virtual, and that we would have to talk to administration. Well, immediately he took the initiative to go right to Miss Mangonia and speak to her within like the next 15 minutes. And she quickly made time for him. He checked every other day with the two of us until he got that okay from the board. When is the board meeting? When do we talk to the board? He was very enthusiastic, and he was very determined. As soon as we got that approval, we started meeting in small groups. We met virtually. He came up with some great games that we played virtually, which was excellent. And then he came up with this idea of a talent show. He had big ideas for a talent show, huge ideas. So I told him, once again, we have to talk to admin. Once again, he took no time in making an appointment with Miss Mangonia. And by that night, 11 p.m., we all had a shared document of an application, a Google form. We had a flyer, and he had included Mr. Mishler and everybody else that needed to be included. So to say the least, he took this from start to finish with such enthusiasm. His main goal was never about himself, which was amazing. He didn't even enter the show. He really just wanted to bring the community together. He really said he missed seeing people's faces. He missed seeing his student body, and he just wanted people to have fun. So we are extremely thankful and impressed by his hard work. And you're about to see, the fruits of all his hard labor.
All right, Bill, cue video.
Here we go.
But now there's nowhere to hide since you pushed my love aside. I'm out of my head, hopelessly devoted to you, hopelessly devoted to you.
Big day to just end. Clouds are shrouding us in moments unforgettable. Each ways to fit the mold that I'm in. But things just get so crazy. Living life is hard to do, and I would gladly hit the road, get up and go if I knew that someday it will lead me back to you.
I know where we can go. I know where we can go. And it's all you and me. We'll kiss the sky goodnight. Just run away with me, darling. We'll get real lost. We'll get real lost again. Just run away with me, darling. We'll get real lost. We'll get real lost again. Darling, we'll get finding where we can go.
That was great. That really was wonderful. How wonderfully resilient children are and so talented. You know, you say a talent show up on the stage. Do you get to draw on a talent show and to use that video where we can see the whole thing happening together and then all the instruments being played at once and singing? It's just unbelievably creative and such talent by everybody. That was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that and sharing that with us.
Agreed.
I'm sorry
Great project.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just give a shout out to Mr. Mishler, who put that whole compilation video together kind of at the last minute too, and edited it down for us. I just want to say thank you, Mr. Mishler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mishler.
Yes, his whole class really just jumped right into when we asked him to be part of it. There was no hesitation at all. His whole entire class, they made it a classroom project and a lesson on editing. So they were amazing. And Liam McGovern at the end, you didn't get to see it. He solved a Rubik's Cube with one hand. He juggled boxes. And like Mr. Maxwell said, it's really the opportunity for students to do things that would have never been done even on a stage. So once again, when we find the positive in COVID and we take out what we can take out of it, I feel like this can continue on in the future this way to, invite many different talents.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Sigerson. That was awesome. And I think that was Eruption by Van Halen he played on the guitar, I think. Awesome. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic. Really, really great stuff and such talented kids, and good to see so many different mediums there too.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other recognition we have is the Town of Brookhaven Black History Night Academic Excellence Award certificates. And I believe I'm announcing those. Is that correct, Janine?
I don't see Sierra Seymour on the participants out there. So
Okay.
I'm gonna think that it's you.
Okay. All right. So these students are awarded certificates, as I said, for Black History Night Academic Excellence. Jaden Keeley in our red cohort, Naya Pemberton in our white cohort, and Isabella Reed in our white cohort. So congratulations to them being recognized by the Town of Brookhaven. Good job, guys.
Congratulations.
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 All right. So, Bill, I guess I have the ability to share my screen, I suppose.
Yes, you do.
Okay. So I should.
Ron, we're going right into the presentation. Right.
If that's okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to preface to the community that we are going to break a little bit. So can I just say, I'm always reluctant to click on the chat at the bottom. But we're getting such nice comments, and Ms. Jones, I think the red heart was for Kate Adams, and thank you so much for that. And then people just commending the children, how awesome they are and such talent. It's very nice to see. So thank you all for that. We are going to break a little bit from the agenda in so much that we will be accepting questions with regards to the presentation immediately after. So we won't have to wait till the end of the evening. So please understand, I just wanted to let you know that beforehand. Okay, Ron.
Okay, so I do have a presentation to make with regard to our school reopening. I think, it's not unusual to do these. I think almost every board meeting since July, we've done some sort of a presentation with regard to our reopening plans. And so no surprise, we are doing one today, but we also did, let that be known that there would be some significant things to discuss tonight. So first, I just want to talk about our sort of, from the very beginning, as I said, since July, we've been doing presentations. And, this slide, it's modified slightly, but goes all the way back to our presentation back in July. And when we talked about or I believe August, we talked about a phased and flexible reopening plan. Because we knew that, when you know better, you do better. And as we, faced a very challenging school year for 2020, 2021, we knew that we would learn lessons and we'd be able to test our capabilities and be able to hopefully make adjustments and move toward more and more in-person instruction for our kids as the year progressed. And so we led with this idea that we were going to basically work off of the data. We're going to try to understand what's happening out there and what our local Department of Health says, and implement things that were in line with the guidance from our Department of Health, local Department of Health, from New York State Education Department, and from the CDC. As you know, there was voluminous guidance that was put out there for us to follow, and we kind of synthesized that guidance and put together a plan that we knew we could implement. And periodically, we've evaluated that plan and tried to make adjustments. We initially had 2 set review dates in September and October, and then ongoing, we consistently reevaluated and with the board's input, with input from the community, we tried to make adjustments that we thought were appropriate and were safe in terms of bringing kids back to school. And ultimately, the goal is to have 100% in-person instruction while emphasizing health and safety. Important things that we always need to consider is the change in guidance. We were all eagerly anticipating guidance that we knew was coming on February 12th, and that guidance came from the CDC. And it was interesting. There was a lot of political pressure. Clearly, President Biden came out, when he was running for president, saying that, in the first 100 days, schools will reopen. But that was not, it was left ill-defined what reopen means. That guidance was later changed to suggest that schools will open at least 1 day per week for students in the first 100 days. So clearly, kind of changing, targets for what school reopening means. And I think the CDC, by reissuing guidance on the 12th of February, 2021, was basically targeting not necessarily Long Island schools, because in comparison to the rest of the country, where schools were not open at all, we were actually ahead of the curve. So they changed guidance, suggested that you need to bring kids in, but they did not change some of the most important things, and those were the mitigation strategies. The mitigation strategies remain the same, and none of those really have changed substantially. Correct universal masking was important, physical distancing, and it's important to note that everything below the quote, regardless of this level of community transmission, everything below that is direct. It was a cut and paste from the CDC, from their website, from the guidance on the 12th. So all of these things clearly are their emphasis. Further, the top half of this slide, schools providing in-person instruction should prioritize 2 mitigation strategies. That also, numbers 1 and 2, are direct quotes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, pulled right off their website just a couple of days ago. So universal and correct use of masks should be required at all levels of community transmission. They have not at all backed off of that universal masking requirement, nor have they backed off the 6 feet requirement. Physical distancing of at least 6 feet should be maximized to the greatest extent possible to ensure physical distancing. So, to the greatest extent possible is the furthest they've come off of 6 feet is essential. So there potentially some flexibility in that. But clearly they are looking to promote 6 feet between people, and cohorting and potting recommended. So limiting cohorts, large group activities do remain prohibited. If you listen to the governor today, my slide is a little bit outdated already because, as of, I believe, March 22nd, the governor suggested that outside activities could go as big as 200 people. So that's later in the month on the 22nd of March, that would go into play. One of the other things that clearly was changed was when the governor announced that high-risk sports could play, and that was effective on February 1st. In Suffolk County, it required a weekly testing of high-risk students participating in high-risk sports. So, this has been presented. I believe this was presented about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We did an in-person learning interest survey. And what we found was that of the respondents, now remember, only 60% did respond, but of those 60%, 85% suggested that in person, they would like to attend 5 days per week of in-person instruction if we could do that. So that's what our community was telling us. And this is what the reality is telling us, is that we are at approximately 85% in person in our schools. So high school's at 81, middle school 82, and it's roughly 85% overall in terms of those choosing in person. So, when we consider in person versus remote, no surprise. I've always said from the start that kids are going to learn best when they're in a classroom in front of their teacher. I think the ability to maximize student achievement to the greatest extent possible requires us to try our best to be fully in person for our kids. It obviously, we can better attend to their social emotional needs of students. The only way I can really gauge a person, it's fine through Zoom. I connect. I have most of my meetings through Zoom these days. However, I cannot truly gauge a person's affect through Zoom. I can potentially read a roll of the eyes or something like that, but I can't truly sense somebody's emotional well-being through Zoom. You can do that in a classroom, and a teacher can get a pulse on how a kid's doing as soon as they walk into a classroom. So we can really attend to their needs much better. I think that in person, a regular, consistent routine of in-person instruction clearly promotes a general well-being and mental health well-being for our students. I think for our homes, clearly, the model where we need to, which day are we in? Is this Wednesday a red cohort or a white cohort? Do I have to make arrangements for pickup or drop off? These are things that are potentially disruptive to our household schedules. And our parents clearly want to have a set routine, and they want to see 85% clearly want to see their kids in school 5 days a week. I think that it provides a greater sense of normalcy. I think at this point, we don't acquiesce and give in to the COVID fatigue and stop wearing masks and stop distancing and stop hand washing and taking the precautions we need to. But we do strive, and we do really crave a greater sense of normalcy. And I think that, obviously a full return to school would be much more normal for our kids, and they'd feel that way. And clearly this would be responsive to the majority of our stakeholders who are asking for a full in-person return to school. So, for these reasons, as you can see top right, the scale weighs toward, these are positive considerations for fully in-person instruction. So, when we start talking about planning for a full reopening of schools, I think it's this idea we need to consider changing this narrative and what is it? Okay. At this point, I think it is not a question of if, it has become a question of when students will return. As a Board of Education, I really want to thank the Center Merchants Board of Education, because the decisions we're making are decisions that are not easy ones. But it comes at a place where our administrative team talks to our bargaining units and our teachers in particular, and we have these conversations, and everyone is fully supportive of what we're attempting to do, and that's keep kids safe while doing the best we can to provide as much in-person instruction as possible. We have done it strategically based on the guidance. We need to look at what the guidance is telling us and how can we incorporate as many aspects of the guidance or all of the guidance to keep kids safe, and do so in a manner that we can manage. We have done some incremental reopenings. So we started with students that, and again, based on some of the guidance, priority was given to certain subgroups that were seen to have greater need and potentially greater at risk. So we followed that guidance, and we started to try to bring back more students. Some of those were students with special needs, students with language acquisition needs, and the guidance also suggested younger students. So if you see the phased reopening that we've done, that's where we began. We began with our youngest students and then our students who are most at risk. And so it has been an incremental reopening because each step along the way, we've taken on additional risk, and we've needed to put in factors to mitigate that risk and really understand how can we continue to do this in a safe manner. We want to include all our stakeholders. We do take feedback from our parents. We take feedback from our teachers. We take feedback from anyone that provides feedback, and we've tried to incorporate that into our reopening. And most recently, we've had some conversations. A week ago, I had a conversation with the CMTA president, Mike Kaczynski. That's Wednesday, and we talked about this, and we had about a half-hour conversation about what does this mean if we are going to be pushing for building more capacity in our secondary campus. And so it involves making sure that our reopening committees are reassembled, and they are assisting with prioritization and coming up with real solutions to some of the obstacles we might face. Some of the actions we have taken with regard to reopening include, as I mentioned before, high-risk athletics began on February 1st. As part of that, there was a requirement for testing. So 352 rapid tests were administered for the winter season alone. Of that, 3 athletes ended up with positive test results. So we had 3 positives that did result in some quarantines. And of that, so it's a little bit less than 1%. But I have to say that, from the county's perspective, if they had, I can't even say how many they had in the entire county, but if they had 50 in the entire county positive tests, from their perspective, if you multiply that by the number of potential infections, this athletic testing monitoring has served to potentially, limit community spread of COVID, because we're catching it in the asymptomatic stages. So, from their perspective, this has been a real positive that has helped to keep schools open. We have increased extracurricular clubs and activities, and we're trying to do more in the buildings. And so that is something that we've opened back up, again, building a sense of normalcy within our buildings so the kids can enjoy the things that they love. We've continued our emphasis on social emotional well-being, clearly providing the mental health resource and support for all students that need it. That is something that we believe in, making sure that, and as I said, the more in person we are, the better a job we can do of that. But all of this is about seeking opportunities to infuse normalcy into the school environment. We will be having an International Baccalaureate night that Ms. Mangoni is going to be running. Some of our award ceremonies we're trying to bring back, and we are bringing back a spring play creatively. When we see the talent show and the things we are able to do, that's fantastic that we were able to leverage our technology resources to be able to pull off a virtual talent show. But some of these things, whatever we can bring back in person, we want to bring back in person safely. We are at a different place than we were over a year ago. We were talking a 1-to-1 Chromebook initiative as pie in the sky. And now it's a reality, 6 to 12, and will be a reality K-12 in the coming year. So, that enables us to do a lot of things. If in fact a reopening causes a larger quarantine, we do have the ability to flip the switch to remote for all students if required. So those are things that allow us to basically, potentially operate even in a quarantine as normal as possible. We have necessary equipment has been ordered. We ordered another 1,500 barriers, desk barriers for the secondary campus, and those will be coming in the coming weeks. The idea of reopening doesn't come without obstacles and challenges. The idea of mixing cohorts, we're going to have greater student-to-student contact. That's without question, because separating out red and white cohorts enabled us to basically keep them separate and never having to quarantine between the two of them. We have not had a major quarantine at the high school yet that impacted large groups of kids. I could tell you that, other schools, I just got a note today, upwards of 100 kids quarantined in my daughter's school. On her first day back to full instruction, 38 students were quarantined. So those are things that happen. And mixing cohorts is going to put us at risk for more quarantines. As it stands, because we've maintained more than 6 feet, we have not had to quarantine large groups of students in our middle school and high school. Decreasing distance below 6 feet is something that likely will have to happen. We're going to work on making sure that we keep it as far as possible. But again, that slight bit of flexibility that's in the CDC guidance, we're going to look at and say we're going to keep 6 feet whenever we can. But we understand that there may be times when we may not be able to keep it 6 feet. Increased density during transitions. Obviously, with everybody back, there's going to be more people in the hallways, going to be more people at arrival time. That's going to, congest our arrival when we're taking temperatures of more people out front. All of those things. Same thing with the congestion in the cafeteria and food service. Having to provide food service for all students in the middle school and high school is going to also add to some of the complicating factors we have. All of these things require additional cleaning. And when we have to clean additional desks, that's all part of the COVID protocols, is making sure that we have a safe, clean environment. And these things are not easy, especially as we increase density. We will need additional supervision. So all of these factors, everything we're adding in, if we are going to provide breakout spaces or remote instructional labs, those kinds of things are going to require additional supervision. Music and physical education still require 12 feet of distance. The guidance has not changed on that. So bringing back red and white cohorts presents a problem, because having an entire band practice together still is not something that we have the space for, and we will need to problem solve and find solutions to those kinds of things. Special spaces, kids typically in a science lab would be working together. Same thing in tech and family and consumer science. Art, in these spaces where kids are, working hands-on with materials, typically, we would be able to allow them to do that. We have to rethink some of those special areas. We will need a commitment. We really need to fully understand what we're in for in terms of the number of students that are going to be committing to our instructional model, either fully remote or in person. And so that's something that we're going to have to work through. Each of the buildings on each of the grade levels is going to have to determine from 6 to 12 which families are, which children are going to be attending school, so that we can really have a solid plan. I'll talk a little bit about that after. In terms of transportation, we know that the buses are going to be a little bit more crowded. There's going to be congestion at drop off and pickup. We encourage our parents to drive our students to school because that helps us with our protocols. However, we understand that may present some problems with regard to congestion during drop off and pickup, and we are going to have to ask for some cooperation and understanding as we do that. I want to be very, very clear that, some of the things I'm mentioning, and I'm not trying to be negative, but we do need to understand that there are potential negative impacts of a move to fully in person. So where the scale leans toward the negative is this idea that there will be a greater potential for in-school spread if we're less than 6 feet. We believe that we've done a great job, keeping kids apart so that when we have to, even if we have to quarantine, that we're not seeing school as a vector of transmission. That we've done a good job to keep our kids far enough apart and fully masked that we have not caused spread within our schools. And that becomes more difficult if we are less than 6 feet. It dramatically increases close contact for a positive case. There clearly will be increasing numbers of students and staff that will be directed to quarantine when we have a positive case. So for instance, if our desks are not 6 feet apart, at least 6 feet apart, minimum 4 students will need to quarantine. That's students adjacent and in front and behind would need to quarantine. And in some cases, those diagonal may need to quarantine. As I said, in my daughter's case, I learned on that first day when 38 students had to quarantine, there you go. You take the 4 and you multiply it by your school day. And that essentially, if you have 8 or 9 periods, is going to add up to 30 to 40 student quarantining per case. It's interesting to note that at Clayton Huey, we didn't have any quarantines in the first part of the year, other than a self-contained environment in special education. However, since we brought everybody back, we did have 8 full class quarantines. The elementary school does work very differently than the high school. The elementary school, because the students are younger, because the students are in the same classroom all day long, that's why the guidance recommends a full class quarantine in elementary, because it's very difficult to really ascertain who the close contacts are when they spend 7 hours together in the same environment.
Then, Ron, I'm sorry, but then the quarantine doesn't generally affect people outside that classroom.
Correct. That's the cohort model that we talk about. Correct. So generally at the elementary, cohorts are contained in one classroom, versus at the high school, cohorts were done differently as red and white cohorts.
And at the secondary level, if we have a positive case, we're going to have prolonged contact tracing, I would imagine, as we have to go through a longer list of people who could possibly have been affected.
Right. So this necessitates seating charts. Kids need to be in the same seats every day, and we really need to have a very clear understanding of where kids are sitting and how close and in how close proximity. So the contact tracing clearly becomes a little bit more difficult at the high school, but we would anticipate with our seating charts in place, it should be very easy to determine who they are. Overall, out the quarantines that we've seen, 89 staff members have quarantined and 253 students have quarantined since September. We know that number will grow, as we've seen in other districts throughout the island that have brought back more of their population. Potential impacts on activities. You never know who the positive case is. So it has the potential to shut down clubs, athletics, because of the fact that, again, if 30 or 40 people shut down, I can tell you my daughter's field hockey team is starting with no seniors, and they are playing 7v7 versus, I think, 11 kids on the field in field hockey. If the other team will allow it. So their first 3 games, they need to play shorthanded with 7 players only, as opposed to full games. And they're optimistic and hopeful that the other team will allow them to participate that way. But these are the kinds of things that we need to be aware of, and we need to be okay with if we are going to do this. The potential for staffing shortages. One thing I can say about this is, again, I have worked very diligently to try to provide every opportunity possible for our staff to become vaccinated. So we have basically gotten to the point where I put out an email on Friday and I said, because we had we partnered with a local Long Island Urgent Care that got about 40 or 50 of our people vaccinated. I had worked with the county to get some special area teachers vaccinated. Most recently, we partnered with the county to have almost 3,000 special educators in the county vaccinated. So we are at the point now at Center Moriches that any staff member that wanted to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by April. And so I think, we have a couple that indicated that for one reason or another, they were not able to sign up for the opportunities. So it's about 4 or 5 staff members that are left, and we're going to be working diligently to get them vaccinated. But that helps. And the reason that helps is because actually just today, we know that the CDC announced that they would allow fully vaccinated people to not have to quarantine if they were close contacts or if they traveled. the New York State Department of Health, actually today, the governor announced that they were accepting that guidance. And so we are awaiting that. And within the week, I would say by next Monday, I think we're going to be in a position where Suffolk County Department of Health Services will say that they will be adopting that as well. So that helps us, because any staff member that comes in contact with close contact with a case will not need to quarantine. That will help us certainly for being able to maintain a fully staffed building. I discussed earlier some possibility of transportation delays. Again, with more people coming back, it's a significant impact on our transportation. We're doubling that. Actually, the participation in interscholastic sports is a help to us, because so many of our kids do participate in sports. And that'll be a help, plus the staggered start. So for the start of the day, middle school and high school don't share the buses. That's a help. At the end of the day, sports helps to, have some students won't ride the buses due to sports. That also will help us. So we do believe that we'll be okay. However, we do have to understand that there is a possibility of some delays in transportation.
Ron, before you leave this slide, you
Yep.
said the CDC made an announcement today with regards to fully vaccinated individuals not having to quarantine if they're a close contact. There is also some speculation that New York might adopt these 7 days in quarantine and test and you're out, because right now we're at 10 days quarantine, correct? New York never went.
New York never adopted that. That is something that I have not heard any more guidance on, other than New York rejected that as guidance. So I have not heard whether they're kind of shifting gears on that. But the fully vaccinated, they did adopt today.
Okay.
And that's
We
2
are still 10 days.
after your second dose, correct?
Yes. So after the way it works is this, once you receive your second dose, then you're in this place where you do not have to quarantine if you're a close contact or if you travel to a restricted location. That's good for 90 days. Okay. And the science behind it says that the efficacy of the vaccine is such that you're safe for 90 days. Once more research is done, it is anticipated that they will extend that 90-day period. But right now, conservatively, they're saying you're definitely safe for 90 days. And I do believe that they will extend that further once they have research to support that it's safe to extend it further.
Is that immediately upon receiving the second dose, or is there a wait period after that, or you don't?
No, I believe my understanding of it is that it's immediately. I think it's within 8 days you're considered fully protected. But I believe the actual this quarantine order, we'll wait for exactly what the guidance says, but I believe it's from the point of the second dose.
It's 2 weeks after the second dose, Ron.
Is that it? Did you read that in guidance?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right. I did. And then I missed that.
It's
I'll wait and see what New York puts out, because clearly they announced it today, and they will put out very specific guidance to it. And the attorneys will do a workup on it within probably 3 or 4 days from now. There clearly is an impact on our fund balance. Bringing kids back is, it's going to be, at least $100,000 that will come off the top of our fund balance that we will not be able to carry over. But this is a cost that, we're certainly willing to, absorb to be able to make sure that, we're doing, what we can to protect our students, to mitigate any risk we're taking on if we are to bring them all back. So, and that's the idea, like what's changed, right? And I think when we know more, we are able to do a better job. And this whole year has been a learning. And so, in order to basically take on the ability to mitigate additional risk is really contingent upon several things. Number one, we are going to get the protective barriers. We'll be putting those on all the desks. We believe that the warmer weather allows for increased airflow and ventilation within classrooms. Clearly, we'll have doors and windows open as the warmer weather comes. Hoping that more parents continue to transport their kids. That's a help for our transportation and minimizing any kind of spread on buses. Whenever we can, We have a lot of technology in our classes, so it's not easy, but there are certain times when we can utilize outdoor learning spaces when possible. Um, can, believe it or not, the testing for high-risk sports, I think, is a mitigating factor because it provides consistent monitoring on a weekly basis for about a quarter of our students. So if there's spread, we're able to pick it up. Like those 3 positive cases hopefully helped us from seeing any further spread out in the community or in our schools. We're going to continue to emphasize mask compliance. Much of what I'm talking about here is stuff that, I'd like to say is from 30,000 feet. We still have a lot of work to do to come up with our final plan. And that's going to come from our high school principals, a high school administrative team, our middle school administrative team, working with our teachers and our support staff to come up with a plan that really makes sense and talking to kids about it, having everybody involved in the decision making. But there is consideration for a surgical mask only requirement. Cloth masks are proven that they are not as effective as the surgical masks. A properly fitted mask is one of the biggest things you can do to reduce spread. Examining this idea of controlling for maximum density in classrooms. If we have to, in classes that have too many students, so if a classroom capacity, if we can get to 5 feet by putting 18 desks in a classroom and there's 25 kids in there, well, potentially we could utilize a remote learning lab 1 day a week for 5 students or 6 students. And so on a Monday, some kids might go to a remote learning lab for that particular class, but the other 4 days a week, they would be in person. The next period, and hopefully for the rest of their schedule, they would be fully in person 5 days a week. But it's a way to say that, like, we can put in some way to control the amount of students in a classroom and control the distance that they are, their proximity within the classrooms. So we're going to be exploring that as a possibility because we want to do so. We want to get the kids back, but we want to do it safely, and we really need to explore every possibility to do so. As I mentioned, the increase in vaccination of staff provides this added layer of protection, as our staff will not be considered possibly, I think that could tell our community that if many staff members are vaccinated, they're not bringing the disease into the school, certainly. So all of these things are things that I think have come over time and are a result of some of the lessons we've learned over the course of a year of dealing with this. So what does the return to learn look like? Well, we're going to be doing that survey. Our principals and assistant principals at the middle school and high school will be reaching out, the administrative team, to try to ascertain exactly who would be fully remote and who would like to be 5 days in person. We need time for our custodial team to do what they need to do, and that's stage the building appropriately, as well as put 1,500 barriers on desks, which clearly takes some time. So a projected return date, barring any spike in infection or staffing shortages and all those kinds of things that can happen, or a large quarantine, our projected return to date would be for grade 6-12 would be Monday, April 5th. April 5th is a school day because we utilized 2 snow days. So Monday, April 5th would be the day after the April break. That provides that time for the custodians to be able to really get the building set, and us to be able to really get into the nitty-gritty of a plan. We need to do some work. We need to count. We need to stage every classroom to see how many desks can fit safely. We need to do enrollment projections for every single period of every single classroom. And then we need to make determinations on whether or not remote learning labs are needed, and what that might look like and how that would be done fairly and equitably for every class. So there's significant work to be done, and setting up seating charts, making sure we have all those things in place. And so we believe that we can make this happen. We believe we can do it safely, but there is work to be done to make sure that we do it safely. I think it's important to note that the new normal is just that. It's not normal. It's not typical, and that we have to adhere to the safety protocols that we have in place. All the things we've been doing really are things that we are required to do, or we're doing because we know that there are things that are working to reduce transmission. Obviously, some of the instructional models that we'd like to use, we're going to have to modify. We can't do the small group work that we used to do in close proximity like we used to. So we have to modify some of those things. And then in terms of the clubs, activities, special events, as I said, until the protocols change and we can allow more people to do different things, there are size limitations for what we can do. I think everyone knows that I'm very active in the county and at the state level. I continue to advocate for what I think is most important, and that is really to be putting a lot of common sense things into this. We've had circumstances that we have had to do certain make certain decisions based on guidance we've gotten from the people we are directed to get guidance from. It is very clear that when I make decisions, the guidance I'm supposed to get in terms of health and safety is the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, and I do speak to them often. But we also do advocate for things that really some common sense solutions that we can incorporate into that guidance, and we'll continue to do so at the county and state level. So I want to thank everyone for your kind attention to this presentation. I will, as Mr. Maxwell indicated, I will be happy to take some initial questions and have some conversation further about this. But I want to phrase this again by reiterating that this is the 30,000-foot view. Melissa, Dr. Reggio, and Mr. Thode, and the administration team in the secondary campus is really going to be digging in and working to fine tune the nitty gritty details of the plan so that we can have a safe return to school for our secondary kids.
So Bill, I know we're in a slightly different format tonight. We don't have to promote anybody, but if anybody would like to speak or ask a question now with regards to the presentation, just use the hand raising. And Bill, will you have to unmute them?
Yes, I'll unmute them.
Okay.
Here we go. We have one raised hand, Carrie, Santos, Terry.
Hello.
Hello.
So I am considered high risk, and my son has been fully remote this year. I've been very encouraged by your prioritization of the safety and, keeping the 6 feet distance and the masks, and was considering and hoping to maybe let my son come to school next quarter. But hearing that you're no longer prioritizing safety and you're okay with, the possibility of in-school spread, that really concerns me now that, safety is no longer a prioritization. So if I'm going to be forced to maintain him, to continue keeping him virtual, I'm curious if there are anything on the table for helping the fully virtual students. I know equity was always a great concern of, the red cohort versus the white cohort, balancing days, but there's not really equity with a fully virtual student. So curious if there's any thoughts towards what could be done, or if that could be considered to help fully virtual students to be able to, stay up with everyone.
Yeah, I don't want you to think that we're abandoning the safety. I know it's clearly we're willing to take on additional risk, but we're feeling like we can mitigate that risk based on what we've experienced over the course of the year. And I know that doesn't that doesn't help. If you're feeling, again, if you're at high risk and you need to do what you have to protect yourself, I fully understand. As far as the kids who are fully remote, we're putting every option on the table. We're looking at ways that we can do some tutoring or things like that, and adding anything we can for any student that is struggling. So if you are struggling, you can reach out to the high school administrative team if your child is struggling. And we are looking to do some of those things. We still have to take our exams, and there are Regents exams that are still required that we want kids to be successful on. So, if there are things there absolutely are plans to do additional supports. And some of those supports can be online supports.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bill?
Okay, we have another hand raised. Gillian Castiglione.
So my question, I guess, is, and I put it in the chat, I'm still very concerned and I'm frustrated with our process because it seems that every school surrounding us, including most of the administration schools, personal school districts, have gone back full time. And we are still sitting at 2 days a week at this point. And now you're saying that April 5th is the earliest that we're looking to come back. Why are we taking so much longer than every surrounding school district when we know that Longwood and William Floyd and other school districts surrounding us are not able to do this with the safety guidelines or whatever it is that is holding us back at this point?
So my answer to that is we've been presenting every 2 weeks since the start of the school year. And from the start, I've always emphasized health and safety. I've always emphasized that the Center Merchant School District is very different than any other school district. Our middle school's at 91% room utilization. Our high school's at 93% room utilization. We do not have the same flexibility that other districts that have bigger footprints and declining enrollment have been able to do. So we have to work with what we are able to do, and that's what we're doing.
I don't agree with that answer. I still feel like there are districts out there. William Floyd has 9,000 kids. They don't have the footprint to do that as well. So I'm still a little bit concerned with why it's taking us this long. At this point, our kids will be in school about 8 weeks full time with in-school instruction, and now some will be required to take Regents exams. So what's the plan around this? And how are you advocating for our kids to work on how they're going to take these Regents exams? Because there is no way that they have the same instruction as, say, a Shoreham Wading River who has been in school 5 days a week since September.
All I can tell you is, like I tell my kids, don't compare yourself to other people, compare yourself to yourself and try to get better every day. And that's what we're trying to do.
Ron, is your kids in school full time?
My kid's in school full time and has had multiple quarantines and has seen her kids go out. So the instruction technically is probably spottier than if we knew what it was every day.
I don't know. I beg to differ, but thank you.
So, Gillian, I'm going to jump in here for a moment as well, because, I know of several school districts, more than several, that are still hybrid, that aren't planning on coming back full time. Some that may not even come back full time for the entire school year. And what we're saying is accurate, is that the difference between what we have and what other school districts have is we don't have the footprint to utilize remote spaces. And it's a difficult decision to make to increase risk for transmission among our student population and our staff population and balance the health and safety against getting every child back into school, knowing that some people now are going to be faced with the decision of losing possibly even those hybrid days and having to go fully remote for whatever their situation might be. These are not easy decisions. We've never been faced with a situation like this before. We do all of our due diligence, and we weigh the risk at every turn. And we feel we need this time to prepare the school, to mitigate those risks the best we possibly can, and to get the children in a way that is safe for everybody.
And I appreciate that, George. I really do appreciate what you're saying and to weigh the risk. But at what point is the education of our children and the therapy and the hardship that they've all faced through this entire thing actually the priority? Because I think at this point, you don't understand what the underlying problems are going to be for these kids who have now been dealing with 2 days a week, 3 every other day, and trying to go hybrid. And now on top of it, we're going to throw regents to 4 different, to 4 different classes.
Gillian,
So that's a whole other issue. And I just feel like at this point, Center Moriches is just not moving fast enough. And we need to start to move a little quicker with this process.
So Gillian, I certainly appreciate your concerns and your point of view. And the priority is that we have to prioritize everything and try to find the best balance that we can. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to do it in a way that's safe and the best for everybody involved. And that's a challenging thing to do. And we're doing the best that we can with it. And again, I understand that you disagree, and I can hear the passion in your voice, and I understand that. But at this point, we feel that this is what's best for everybody, for education, for health and safety of everybody involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, do we have more hands?
Yes, we do. Aiden Pellegrino.
Yes, I'm here. I'm not asking a question. I'm more or less saying a general statement. I'm a student at Sandwiches High School, a senior, in fact. And it was said earlier that there was a potential increase in spreading during a full 5-day in person. So what that means is that it's saying that you're spreading, there's an increase for spreading in a controlled environment in which kids are more likely to get it, not from here, not at school, but from other environments that are not controlled. And someone just pointed out that mental health is also another issue as well. As a student, I can agree. That is my statement.
Thank you, Aiden.
Thank you, Aiden.
Okay, next we have Christine Buff.
Good evening. My question for you guys is about band. I do see that you stated it still needs to be 12 feet apart. I do know, I certainly don't have the information in front of me, but there are definitely moments or places that have stated that 12 feet is not necessarily a requirement, as you, I believe, said. My thought or question is, if volleyball is the only sport that's technically inside, will the band now have the opportunity to be in the larger part of the gym so that maybe they can potentially play all together? And I see that there'll be some sort of play that's happening, some variation of a play. So what are the plans for variations of secondary concerts? Because that's, kind of a big deal. And it would be really nice if everyone could get a chance to hear the kids play music too. Thank you.
I hear music, I think.
That's my son again. He always picks board meetings to practice because it's just his timing. But yes, you do hear music. So that's showing you and watching all the people that won that talent show. It was all music and arts and these are things. And again, I say this every meeting, like it needs to be. And and not for nothing, I will agree with Gillian and some of the things that she stated there. Like, I know of 3 other districts that are rolling this out like in the next 3 weeks, and they've purchased their barriers months ago. So I agree with, like, I don't really feel like, I know we're doing everything we can, but I don't feel like it's been quick enough. And, we're going to get like 8 weeks of school. Then there's AP exams at the early of May, and then high school's over and it's test mode. So they're not even in the build. They're not even going to get a chance to be with all their friends and maybe be there together, like Aiden's suggesting, and not like being together in a controlled environment versus on, at someone's house with no masks on and basically getting sick outside of school. So get them in school more. So maybe they will do less outside of school without masks on. So I don't know how you want to answer my 25 questions, but thank you.
What I can tell you, Christine, is that thank you. And, we want to address all of that. We want to see, and come up with creative ways. Like I said, this is a plan to get the kids back and get the kids back safely. How we go about figuring out how to blend the white and red cohort band kids together, that's something that we're going to need the expertise of our band department, as well as looking at our facilities. So yeah, we're open to any creative ideas to try to make it work.
How about outside on the field under the lights, now that we have cameras up, and maybe it won't be the best sound quality, but they'll get a chance to be together,
right,
as an entire
we're
ensemble.
we're open to all of that. Honestly, we're not shying away from any good ideas.
Okay, so where should I send my list?
You can send it right in. Send it to me.
Okay, you know I'm not shy. Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine.
Okay, up next is Debbie's iPhone.
Thank you. Hi, it's Debbie Matos. How are you all this evening?
Hi.
I'm just going to follow up on something that Gillian brought up, and so I just didn't hear an answer to it, and it's Regents exams. I've got a child who is absolutely stressing over the fact of whether or not she's going to have to take them. Our students do take very seriously these exams that come their way. And I am just curious, as we have not had the same instructional environment that other schools, as pointed out, what we're doing to advocate for our children. Because like I said, my 16-year-old, wonders every day, what's going to happen? How are we going to do this? What's the plan? How are we advocating for that?
In terms of advocating, do you mean in terms of the requirements for testing?
Well, how are we going to ensure that our children are prepared if they have to take them? Will they count? What's the I guess the guidance that's coming along from New York State at this point, from the Board of Regents, and then how are we going to successfully prepare our children?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of that, some of that guidance came down from, the federal government and the Biden administration. I do sit on the Commissioner's Advisory Council for New York State, and some of those questions are going to be brought up next week in terms of advocacy. In the next, I believe it's Friday, we have a meeting, and then I think Monday, we are with the Commissioner on Monday, where we will be talking about those kinds of things around testing and what exactly the requirements will be. So certainly I will be a part of that in terms of advocating for, what's fair for our kids. And then in terms of the preparation, as I indicated earlier, not just for those kids that are remote, but any children that require help, we are willing to do whatever we can to try to provide additional supports and some, extra help sessions and tutoring, for kids to provide preparation for those Regents exams. And we are looking into how to provide those sessions for kids.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I think my concern is again, going back to Gillian, we've got school districts around us that are back in 5 days. My brother's children go to Seaford. They've been back in 5 days. I personally do not feel comfortable having my child take Regents exams where, 6, 7, 8 months down the line right now, she's in school 2 days a week. She is struggling in a core subject, which isn't her strongest subject. And she's got a Regents in front of her. And honestly, kind of going along the lines of what others are saying about mental health and the way our children are taking things and perceiving things and internalizing things, I think they really would struggle with the fact of not doing well and taking that so much harder than maybe in the past.
I understand.
So I'm sure and I understand. I know you don't have that answer at the moment, but that I know that is a concern for our children as to what's going to happen. And I just want the best for my daughter, her friends, her schoolmates, as I know you do. But I'm at the point that I don't want her to take these tests, and I don't want to let her take these tests if they come down the line. I
agree. And I think that's been the stance that I've taken, in the state, is that, hey, at these, it doesn't make sense because, I think that, an argument can be made, and I actually spoke to a reporter today for about 40 minutes about the pandemic effects and some of the inequities that exist. And it's very easy, to be very critical, because we don't feel like we're getting what we need. I could be very critical of my children's school. I could be very critical of what we're doing in Santa Mauritius. And then there are districts that are getting far less than what we're providing. The pandemic has exacerbated this statewide, countrywide, the inequities that exist in education. And I think that, so for me, the advocacy has always been, it does not make sense to provide the same standard in terms of Regents exams and make them requirements. I would like to have our kids take those Regents exams so that we know where they stand, but they should not be high stakes tests that make or break a kid's graduation.
Now, and I can appreciate that. Thank you. I'm very hesitant about those exams, but I do appreciate any more insight that comes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all of that. Bill?
All right, we got one more, Renee Pissarro.
So, I mean, I think I'm in a different place because at this point, we're so late in the game. I'm on the fence about even putting Emily back into school full time. Seeing where she is, I'm almost at the point where she's doing everything right. And I see people being able to put our kids out on quarantine, even when they do everything right. So she played basketball and I saw an entire team get put out, even when they did everything correctly. So I'm at the point where I'm considering putting her remote because she's already emotionally and socially stressed, or considering putting her in another school at this point. So like, how do I support her and how do I work with that? And I mean, I have the Regents' concerns, which you're already discussing. How do we look at that? Because she's going to play soccer. She's a lacrosse player. I'm already stressed about her socially. She's, I mean, probably oversharing at this point. She's already looking at therapy at this point. Where, I mean, we discuss that, twice a week. Jeremy's working with me about that. This has already severely impacted her. Like, how do I decide, do I even consider putting her in 5 days? Is 5 days something that is definite? Is 5 days something that, I get her hopes up about and then isn't going to even happen? Like, this is something that like, is not just stressing her, like, and we don't talk about that it stresses me.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we're trying to get her, just day to day through. So how do I get her to a place that she can be successful? Because this is something that we're talking about with everybody. So.
No, I get it, Renee. And then, I mean, I'm living it too, I mean,
Right.
I got my 4 girls and we're up and down all the time. And so, I hear you, the board has been supportive and the administrative team is committed to opening up the 5 days. And we're going to be, digging our heels in, rolling up our sleeves to put the plan in place and do it as best we can. So, whatever we can do, you said you're working with Jeremy, whatever we can do, internally with supports, we'll provide for you to help to make that happen and make you feel comfortable.
I mean, and not to, to dig my heels in on that, but I mean, is it worth doing external sports? Because I see what's getting shut down. And when I'm doing travel, I don't have that issue. I mean, do I consider exposure to that? Is that a worthwhile endeavor? And not to push on that. But
yeah, no, I mean, my 11th grader is struggling severely, and the sports is the one thing that is helping to make her feel better about it all. So to me, I think that's an outlet that if they enjoy it, you want them to participate, but you do have to go in eyes wide open because anything can happen under the rules that we're forced to adhere to here.
Yeah, it was working for us until all of a sudden she got put in a bad position. So it's a blessing and a curse. So it's not the expectation I was expecting. So I guess I have to kind of figure it out on my own.
Thank you, Renee.
Okay, we have Megan McGill.
Yeah, it's not Megan, it's Heather.
Oh, Heather.
Heather.
I have a question. Earlier in the year, you guys had done a presentation and you had gathered some data with respect to, the students' academic performance and, how it compared to this time last year. And I think the standard, Ron, just correct me if I'm wrong, that you were looking at was the number of students, I believe, that were failing 2 classes at this time versus last year at the same time. Have you guys updated that analysis since the end of the first quarter?
We have not done another analysis of it yet, but that's something that we were planning on doing.
Okay, because I think that would be really helpful. I mean, that's what we were determining, which of our students were at high risk for, lack of educational performance this year. So certainly I think, and I had said it at the meeting at that time, that I thought after the second quarter and now into the third quarter, you'd have better data because, the first quarter was an adjustment. Teachers were very lenient with the students and helpful in giving them extra opportunities for credit towards their grades and things like that, that I think have since gone by the wayside and rightfully so. But I think you'll see that your numbers have increased significantly with the number of students who are failing 2 more classes. And then beyond that, again, looking at what your students who weren't failing 2 classes that were passing and what their grades had been last year at the same time. So I think that's a really important analysis that needs to be done because I think it would emphasize the fact that these kids need to be back in school for 5 days a week, much quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Bill?
Looks clear. No hands.
Okay. Well, we will have 2 more, I think, question periods. So if anybody has any more discussion points, there'll be opportunity for that. And, we say it every meeting and we're all faced with challenges and we're trying to do what is best for everybody. And that includes, I know somebody put in the chat mental health, and that includes mental health as well. So we are taking everything into consideration and we're trying to make the best decisions for everybody. So thank you for sharing. That brings us to sorry, I lost my place here. Committee reports.
Okay. So one of the board committees that met, I'm sorry, my dog just ran in the door and jumped on me. Sorry. One of the committees is our legislative committee, and I would report that I've been meeting with legislators recently, obviously for much of the advocacy. Met with last week. I met with Fred Thiel in his office. I also met with Alexis Week, the new Senator Alexis Week. And I have to say, I'm pleased with the conversations I'm having there. Friday, I am meeting with Joe DeStefano and Jody Giglio in the Riverhead office. And next week, subsequent to that, we have our real advocacy push where I probably have 5 or 6 meetings with legislators. And really the conversations are around the uniqueness of Santa Merchis. Santa Merchis is a very unique environment in terms of I want our legislators to understand. I say that we are the poster child for what's broken with the foundation aid formula. Foundation aid is the formula by which schools are funded. And the things that are the biggest drivers in funding schools are, number one, the wealth of the district, and then the needs of the district. 10 years ago, we were a 0.88 combined wealth ratio. A 1.0 is average wealth. We were a 0.88 10 years ago. We're a 0.71 today. So our wealth has decreased since the start of our relative wealth has decreased since the start of the foundation aid formula. And so with that reduction, you'd expect an increase in state aid. Furthermore, that puts us at number sixth lowest in the county in combined wealth ratio. But yet the percent of our district that is funded through state aid, we are 22nd in the county. So there's a disconnect, and I'm trying to allow our legislators to understand what that disconnect is. We've seen almost double population in ENL. We've seen a 10% increase in free and reduced price lunches. All of the drivers that push the foundation aid formula should mean that we'd be getting a greater percentage of aid from the state, but yet we're not. So that's some of the messaging that I'm giving to them. Further, we're also advocating for things that would help us, like regulatory flexibility, in terms of, we utilized reserves, and now we will be beholden to, number one, we utilize the reserves to purchase Chromebooks. So we spent $200,000 to purchase Chromebooks so that we could get to a one-to-one. That was some regulatory flexibility to allow us to do that. Under that regulatory flexibility, it was we needed to repay it within 5 years and pay ourselves back interest. Under the new, essentially they're giving, under the new legislation that's been proposed by Fred Thiel, and I helped him to talk through this, and he's been great about it. We would get a year buffer where we would not have to pay it back. It would be a payback over 10 years, and we wouldn't have to pay interest. So really a big difference and a help in terms of, every dollar helps. We are looking at our Part 154 regulations to see if we can hopefully expand the grade level bands so that it's not a 2-year band where we could combine children, but upwards of 3, which could help us. Lots of things, not just money that we're talking about, but clearly with a $1.9 billion federal stimulus package that's coming out, we do anticipate that more money will come to the schools, and we're hopeful that it will come our way based on some of these conversations we're having. Good news I'm hearing is that there is the possibility that, programs like Parent Child Plus could come back. And so those are conversations that I think are really productive and optimistic that we're making progress in terms of the advocacy for our schools. And then as far as Ricardo, do you want to talk a little bit about Technology Committee or DEI?
We haven't met, Ron, since the last meeting, so there's really nothing to report. We do have technology coming up next week, Technology Committee, and also DEI is coming up next week. So at the next meeting, I should have a full report for the board and the committee, and the community regarding the two committees.
Okay. All right. I think that probably all we got right now. George.
Okay. Thank you. This brings us to questions and comments regarding tonight's agenda only. So if you have any questions regarding the rest of the agenda, just raise your hand. Use the hand raising. Bill?
All right. Yep, we got one. Hold on. Heather?
Thanks, Bill. Just one other question about the presentation. In the high school, so grades 9 to 12, do you know what percentage of the classes that are being offered right now will have issues with the less than 6 feet distancing? Because I know that we do have some classes that have very few students in them. So what percentage of the classrooms are we actually concerned about?
Yeah, that's, as I said, Heather, this was like the 30,000 foot presentation. Jeremy and Melissa and, Marissa and Courtney are digging into that to determine exactly what those impacts might be. I don't have that for tonight, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, another hand. Lisa Marin.
Hello, thank you so much. I just want to say that I know you have parents on both sides of the issue, and I really just wanted to show my support because I honestly think you've been hitting the exact right note. I'm super excited about the April 5th, 5 days in, and what part of my excitement comes from the confidence that I know you're going to work to make sure it's done as safely as possible with, limited mitigation and with maximum mitigation. So I know you're in an impossible position, all of you, board, superintendent, assistant superintendents. So I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate your position and really appreciate how everything's been handled thus far, and really excited for April 5th. So I hope that there's some great plans in place, and I do trust the administrators to work out all the details and making sure that everything's done very well, as it has been, in my opinion, thus far. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, Gillian?
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So I'm just kind of piggybacking on Heather a little bit. So have we done any research so far regarding the classroom sizes? I know that suggestions have been made, including one that I made myself, to see if we can get these kids back sooner. So I think they kind of piggybacks on what I was saying before, that we're taking this a little slower than I think we need to, and we should be moving at a quicker pace. So what have we done to look at class sizes so far?
We have, of course, examined class sizes. We determined in our classrooms, we determined exactly how many desks we could fit to maintain 6 feet. And when we determined that, we did not move toward a remote learning lab model like we're looking at now. If that's what you're asking,
No, I'm asking if
we know exactly how many kids are in every class. We didn't need that for the model that we had.
No, but if we're trying to move to another model, and this is something that we've been working towards the whole time, why don't we have an idea of how many students are in a class now and what that looks like? Do you understand what I'm saying? So like if we have a Spanish class that has 30 kids, 15 on each day, they might have to move to a different room. Wouldn't you know that by now?
We do know that. Absolutely, we do.
Okay, because that's not how you answered Heather's question. So that's why I guess.
What I said is I don't have that data in front of me, and that Jeremy and Melissa and the team is going to look at it to determine exactly what that is, because now the metrics changed. Now the metrics went from 12 desks to maintain 6 feet to 18 desks for 5 feet. So it's a new formula and it's a new examination of the data.
And we're also going to need the data from the survey.
Okay, but we've been taking surveys. So we took a survey back in January about how many students would go back in. Did we do the data when we did the survey back in January? And then there was another survey about seniors coming back. But did we do the data on that?
Are you referring to the survey, Gillian, that 56%, I think, of people answered?
Yes.
Was it 56 or 60%?
Yes.
Right. So we didn't get a full picture, and the picture that we got at that time is that we weren't able to, with the constraints we had at that time, bring everybody back in full.
Okay, so
right.
How long would it be before we have the data to see if this is something that we can do? Because obviously that's something that we need first, correct?
So what I would say is what we've said today is we are committed to making this happen, and we are moving forward with the plan. So, I'm not sure what we're accomplishing going back and questioning the previous decisions. What we'd like to do is move forward.
Well, I think that that's my point. My point is that I want to move forward, and we're going a little bit slow. So this is information that I probably would have looked into already. That's fine.
Thank you, Gillian. Bill?
Let me take a look. Nope, 0 hands are up.
Okay, thank you. So approval of minutes. The Board of Education is asked to accept the minutes of the following meetings as prepared by the district clerk. Minutes of the meeting of the Board of Ed on February 10th, 2021, and minutes of the special executive meeting of the Board of Ed, February 24th, 2021. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Janine, I think it's you now.
All righty. Financial reports. Be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accepts the following financial reports. A, Treasurer's Report from January 2021. Student Activity Report, Treasurer's Report, January 2021, and budget transfers.
Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Consent agenda vote. Be it resolved, a motion to approve the consent agenda asterisk agenda items or consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are approved via a single vote unless they are removed from being a consent item prior to the vote.
Motion,
Motion.
second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Discussion?
Yes. You what? Marcus?
Yeah, discussion on
Okay.
item 11, business and finance. I just had a quick question, I guess, for Carrie, disposition of equipment. I noticed there's a lot of equipment this time, and I'm not questioning why it's a lot. I'm just curious. Probably not all of that is broken. Does it all just get scrapped and recycled, or is there anybody that would accept used equipment?
So it's a combination of things. If you recall, our annual audit at June 30th, the one finding in the management letter was we did not do the fixed asset inventory last year due to COVID. So we did it this year. And we've also switched companies, and being that we switched insurance companies, they pay for that triannual inventory. So since we switched insurance companies to Utica, it's a new asset company. So they came in, did a full inventory. We're switching to a computerized system of tracking the inventory besides Excel spreadsheets. And as a result, we found a lot of this equipment has been long gone, never disposed of at some point. So we're reconciling a lot of it right now. Some of it is stuff that just no longer is working. And a lot of the computer stuff, Bill Nofi usually takes care of trying to dispose of in the proper manner. Things that are just no longer working and really can't be refurbished any longer. So that's why it is a very large disposition, and there may be still some more coming through as we're still trying to reconcile a few items, but this was the bulk of it as a result of that inventory.
Okay. So in general, though, does any of this equipment qualify for, I don't know, donation or reuse by anyone?
We'd have to look at it specifically, and we can certainly look into it. Sometimes there are auction sites available to school districts in order to dispose of these things. I've used them in my past. They're not very successful. It's a lot more work than worth the value of getting the $20 that you might receive out of it. But we can certainly look into it to see how we will physically get rid of these items, and if there is any way we could give them to a charitable organization or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the second public comment section. These are general comments about anything that you would like to speak about. So if you would like to, you can go ahead and use that hand raising function again. Bill?
Nope, no hands raised.
Okay.
Wait, one, sorry. Hold on. Heather.
Heather?
Yep, sorry, guys. One last question, I promise. I had asked Ron earlier in the week, last week, I don't remember, it's a blur, what the school's position was on a student's expectation of privacy under HIPAA during a global health crisis. And I know you guys were looking to get answers. I was hoping that was going to be presented tonight. Do you have answers to that question?
Well, we've got basically two different, well, not two different. We got, the answer essentially is there's FERPA and there's HIPAA. Okay. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And under HIPAA, basically the attorney for Suffolk County made contact with her, and basically the standard for that is that you're permitted to give the minimum amount of information necessary to conduct contact tracing. So essentially in the idea of high-risk sports, you have to work with the other school to basically be able to do the contact tracing. If in fact a parent says, no, you cannot share my child's identity, it would be a violation of HIPAA for that school to share the identity of the child with us. The contrary opinion comes from FERPA, where Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, it's not considered necessarily a violation of FERPA within a district to be able to share identifiable information if you're acting in the best interests of the public health. So there's a discrepancy between what the education attorneys are saying and the health department attorneys are saying with regard to HIPAA and FERPA. So there actually is a conference call that I facilitated between our legal representation, Gercio and Gercio, and the county's attorney on Friday, so that we can have very clear guidance. And that's always the push. That's the push in advocacy, so that we can have very clear guidance and very clear understanding for every single superintendent, every single athletic director, and every single coach in the county with what this should be. So that's kind of where we're at with it.
How will that be shared with other school districts after the conference call? And then what would make that binding on other school districts? Because it seems like it would be an advisory opinion to me.
Correct. It'll be a guidance document that will come from the Department of Health Services through their legal team as a recommended protocol for how to conduct it.
But we wouldn't be able to necessarily hold other school districts accountable to whatever standard or position is determined after this conference call.
Well, the whole point is to create clear guidance that is countywide, that everybody follows the same guidance. Yeah, that's what we're always working for.
Unfortunately, we know not all the schools in Suffolk County followed the same guidance.
Well, I mean, I don't have authority over all school districts, but if there's guidance that comes out and they are told that this is the way it needs to happen, then they certainly can be held accountable if they don't.
Okay. And our school is going to follow whatever the recommendation is that comes out of that conference call?
Absolutely.
And then you'll share that with the community so we know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather.
So George, I did want to comment, if while we wait for anybody else, that the Town of Brookhaven Black History Night Academic Excellence Award, I just wanted to also state that our own Jean Lanham was the presenter for that, also for the county, for the town. So it was kind of nice that our kids were recognized by one of our own.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ron, for sharing that. Bill, any more hands?
No more hands raised.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes, motion
Yeah.
carried unanimously. Next Board of Ed meeting will be March 17th, exec at 6, action approximately at 7 o'clock. Location to be determined. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming tonight and sharing with us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you March 17th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
good night.
Bill.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night.